Thanks for joining us for this session. So we're going to be explaining some practical experience on how we're leveraging open source to bridge the gap between research and standardization. So first, a little bit about ourselves. I'm Silvia. I'm Director of Software and Standards at Etsy. I have a background of software development. I joined Etsy like 12 years ago, and I have spent the last 8-10 years trying to make Etsy decision makers comfortable with the idea of open source and trying to show them and learn by doing all the benefits that open source can bring to standardization.
And I'm Ricard. I'm from Catalonian Center of Telecommunications, and I'm from academia. So you see that I'm a research director there, and my main interest is the research on smart networks and services, 6G, and all these kind of topics. You will see that our research has focused to the development of open source, and then I started sharing at Etsy TerraFlow SDN open source group, which I will later talk about.
So first of all, let me check who in the room is familiar with Etsy, with the European Telecom Standardization Institute. Okay, so let me spend a couple of minutes explaining what we do. So Etsy is an SDO, it's a standards developing organization. There are many of those out there. Etsy is just one of them. The idea of these organizations is that we bring together companies and other organizations so that they work together in setting standards. They're going to define systems. In the case of Etsy, it's mainly focusing on ICT and telecom systems. The idea is that the main goal of standards is to achieve interoperability, to make sure that when solutions go out on the market, they can work with each other, they can be like plug and play. This has a lot of benefits. It brings an economy of scale. It brings cost reduction for those companies putting products in the market. It brings quality. And the idea is that these standards are built by consensus, so we help companies sending delegates and working together, collaborating in setting up these standards. In the case of Etsy, we are an independent non-profit organization. We have over 900 member organizations around the world from 60 different countries based on the 5 continents. And we have a long track of 35 years working on ICT standardization. We have a diverse membership, and something interesting is that 25 of them are SMEs or micro enterprises. And they come from large spectrum of backgrounds, can be also large companies, research entities, academia, government, and public bodies, and so on. We are working on many different topics, mobile communications, 5G, 6G, Internet of Things, cybersecurity, network virtualization, and many, many other topics. Actually, the work is created by members. When decide as a topic which is of interest for standardization, they come together. They need to be supported by at least 4 members, and they can create new activity, new work at Etsy.
Okay, and I'm from research. So that's something that maybe some of you know. If you are used to European research, I know I'm in UK. Now UK is back to European research, so that's a good news. And there are 3 main pillars in this kind of funding. Have you ever write a proposal for requesting money to the government? I guess so. Okay, one here. Okay, so you might have applied to ERC grants. This is the basic research funding. When you got closer to the market, and networks are closer typically to the market, you have the second pillar. So you see different clusters. I'm a networking guy, so I'm in the digital industry and space cluster. That's how it is well organized. Then, moreover, we have a joint unit between public and private money to work together into research for networks. That's what we call the SNS, the Smart Networks and Services Joint Unit. That's where most of our calls and some of the projects that we will later explain come from. And all this is organized typically in a call for proposals. You have a text that is being defined by a series of experts, and it's being discussed by the Commission. and then the different partners join forces to go to resolve one challenge. And that's how we work typically. So we work with consortiums, 10, 20, 30 partners working together to reach one challenge of the Commission on a specific topic. And that's what it typically, you write a proposal and then you get money to dedicate on that challenge for 3 years. After that, project is dead, all the people go for another challenge. This will bring some, as you will see, it brings some troubles for the sustainability of the results of the projects, and that's why we are here today. So let's, and also another reason of we're here, we're networking guys, but we do open source. Why is that? Because we try to support typically network operators. Network operators, they need a lot of automation in the networks. We need to provide these smart services and smart networks and services. And for that, we need softwareization of all the networks. So all the different layers at ITU, from layer 0 to layer 4, we are automating everything, and this is complex to handle. You will see different perspective, and then today we will show you different projects that fit in some specific domain solutions for the networks, and that's what we will be presenting.
So we mentioned that networks have more and more software. They are becoming software-based, and also something similar is happening with standards. So the classic standardization way, it's quite waterfall, let's say. We start with the concept. We might write a technical report explaining that concept and the work we might want to do around it. And then we start with what we call 4 stages. We start with service description. We continue with a functional model. Then we go to detailed specifications and some requirements for testing and conformance assessment. And actually, as we get to the detailed specifications, more and more, we're not really writing them in Word or publishing a PDF, but we're writing machine-readable contents. We're writing API definitions, open API definitions, for example. We're writing data models, and we're also writing test specifications and methods. So we're seeing that the standardization landscape is changing a little bit. What it used to be just piles of documents and PDFs is now also combined with links and reference to Git repositories and pseudocode, machine-readable definitions in some GitHub.
And something similar happens in the research perspective. So what happens, we have a lot of software in research. So, but this typically, it's a kind of software that it's low usable and it has a very bad user experience. Because it's software that it's written for a specific challenge, and it's something that has not been thought for the big public, let's say. It's for the researchers community, so it's something that we need to push harder. Also, there is the big difficulty on what happens to that software after the 3-year project ends. You run out of money, you have the partners who have been contributing to that software, but then who maintains it, which is the sustainability model for this business case, let's say. So that's something that's very important because it helps, research helps triggering these open source projects, but then who keeps maintaining them, who feeds them, who contributes to them. And that's something very important to think about. Also, there is typically insufficient documentation and training. So we focus on developing new features and less on documenting and how to use the code and how to apply it to your needs. So that's something that this typically is a problem, I would say, in all open source, but most significantly in the open source that comes from research. It scales poorly and it has low performance, but I think that one of the most important things is the lack of reproductivity and openness, in the sense that typically also there are some companies that they just do a dump of all that software that they have written, but it's impossible to compile that. So that's something that happens almost in our community still. And of course, there are a lot of other difficulties of integration and interoperability. So that's one of our daily business in research. And what we are going to discuss today is how to bridge these issues that we have encountered.
Okay, so we have on one side all these SDOs developing standards and sometimes defining these open APIs, these data models as code, which is like empty shells, right? It's just the way you're going to communicate with other components. And on the other side, we have all these research projects coding very quickly because they're going to run out of funding in 2 or 3 years, and creating some code that no one knows what will happen with it after the project runs out of funding. And actually, these two pillars are working on the same topics. We are both working on network software. We've found in a very pragmatic way that we can have these two worlds meet in the middle thanks to open source. Actually, we are creating a space in between where standardization and research can meet to work together on developing more sustainable open source software that can help both sides of this slide. At ETSI, we've called these software development groups. They are tailored, these new type of groups that are not going to be working on standardization, they are going to be working on collaborative software development. We give these groups the choice of license, including open source licenses. We don't mandate they use open source licenses, but to date, all the projects we have created have chosen to have an open source license, an open community, and a meritocracy-based governance. So we can safely call them open source. To create one of these groups, as any other work at ETSI, you just need to have support from 4 ETSI members, and then the work and participation is open to non-members, individuals, users, developers, and whoever wants to join. The benefits for standardization are quite a lot. So first of all, we bridge research in. It's a vehicle to bridge innovation, to provide a platform for experimentation, quick prototyping, provide early and regular feedback to the standardization groups. I mentioned before it was very waterfall and things take very long. So thanks to this platform for experimentation, we can give them feedback earlier. We can have them sometimes fail earlier and fix the path earlier. Shorter cycles, more agile cycles, which bring the standards earlier to market and with better quality. This open source is also a very nice vehicle to fostering adoption. It's very difficult to go through these piles of specifications to understand how a 4G, 5G system works. But if you have some software modules that you can download, clone, play with it, modify things, install, and so on, it's way easier. So it's a nice vehicle for fostering adoptions, and for ETSI it's also a nice way to get to know a younger community of contributors, to get closer to developers, and to learn about new ways of working, more agile ways of working, new methods, new tools, and a lot of things we have to learn out of open source.
Yes, and also for research, so there are also a lot of benefits. So it's not only for standardization, but if we take a look at these software development groups from the research perspective, we see how this gap that we were talking about is bridged. The problem with the sustainability of the project is improved because at least you have there a place which hosts the project, which runs the different specifics for the open source. You have all the different aspects well covered and a lot of support, but also it is important that not only it is sustainable, but it's a neutral place, because typically where you have when you create this software with the different partners in a consortium, you have different interests. You have the vendors' interest, different competing companies working with the same objective. You have the different operators' interests, which are the interests might be or not be aligned with the vendors' ones, the academia's interests. So you need a neutral place to have this discussion in this meritocracy that Silvia was explaining. And that's something that's most of the different things that make the decision of where you place your open source community makes it important. There are also other things, but of course the global community, when you open source, there are a lot of eyes. I would also say that there are a lot of benefits in research from the security terms. So more openness of the code. It helps also a better code itself. That's something that's important in networks and which are closer to real security needs, and that's mostly the benefits for research that we have.
So we're going to tell you about some success stories we've lived through so far. The first one is open source Mano. Open source Mano was created like 8 years ago. ETSI at that time was working on many different things, but one of the things that were keeping us very busy was network function virtualization. This was a very dynamic, very big group of around 300 companies working together on building the telco cloud, so applying ICT cloud techniques to the network operators' networks. This community was open to ETSI members and non-members, and brought with us a number of new players that were very active in other communities, in open source communities such as OpenStack and some Linux Foundation projects. So we learned a lot from them, to the point that as this NFV group decided at some point in time, some of them decided, we want to have our own open source project because we want to build this management and orchestration stack that we are defining. We want to build it as we define it. We want to align with ETSI NFV definitions, but we want to prove on the spot that we were going in the right direction. It was a bit controversial at the time because there was nothing written in the ETSI directives that we could do open source. It was not written that we couldn't do it either. But the decision taken at that moment in time was to create this as a pilot project, give the opportunity to those companies to come together and build together this software, and to observe what was happening, to learn from that experience. And it kind of worked. It's been running for 8 years. It's still alive. And something very unexpected that happened is that we saw a very big research ecosystem be born and grow around this project. Actually, we saw that a lot of projects active in smart networks and services and the 5GPP program in Europe, they need an orchestrator. They were looking at network functions virtualization as well, and they needed something off the shelf that could work and solve some of the orchestration challenges. So they just took open source Mano, they used it. Sometimes they modified it, sometimes they brought some bug reports, sometimes they brought new features. And the fact that this project was open source and open to all of them to collaborate enabled this reuse for once the software these projects were using was not going to be put off the shelf at the end of the funding. It already had a neutral home, and as projects were concluding their life, all the projects could take up and take it from there. Take what had been developed by the core developers, but also what other research projects were developing. And actually it came up with this idea of reusing the software modules that are built in research.
So let's jump to TerraFlow SDN, which it is the other way around. We started as a research project, and we have opened it to the community where different vendors have interacted with us. This is a project that focuses also on the control of the network. That's an SDN controller. So it's a project that focuses on how your network equipment, like routers and firewalls and all these kind of networks, also for transport, it is organized and the different traffic flows are prioritized. That's something that we needed a lot of standards. It's a huge community around the world of standards from very different bodies. What the strategy of the operators has been in this case is to provide reference implementation of those standards, because standards are competing. There are different competing standards. There are different topics that are addressed by different organizations which are colliding. And in order to foster an aligned industry, we are producing real code, which is able to run on the real systems. And that's something that's important also. So how you align industry with an open source contribution. It's not about creating a new product. It's about saying, okay, these standards which have not, which are on the pathway of the different products, how they need to be interpreted, how they need to be aligned, and how they need to cooperate together. This is something that we are able to show. And that's why you see this bridge between different standard communities, in this case, ETSI, ITF, old ONF, OpenConfig, which is not a standard body, but it's a group of hyperscalers, and the Telecom Infra project from Meta. And of course, this has also evolved from the other side, as Silvia was telling. We have also, now that we have ended our TerraFlow project, we are having new contributions from different research projects to enhance and support this open source. This is one of the new babies on the block. So that's a service-based operator support system. This is one important tool for network operators. And it has been, the kickoff meeting was held at CTC just half a year ago. And also with the same purpose. This was the result of several research projects. It wanted to have a more impact into the community. It wanted to support this, to be fitted with this sustainability of having different contributions. And the place was Etsy.
And this is the latest group we have created. It was kicked off only a few weeks ago. OpenUK is developing an open source common API framework as defined by 3GPP. 3GPP is the partnership project where Etsy is member, who are defining 4G, 5G, 6G standards. Actually, they defined this common API framework as a way to expose and invoke APIs in a secure, consistent way. The initial focus was 3GPP APIs, network APIs, but actually it's technology agnostic. It can be applied to any kind of API. And we had, there was a research project called Evolve 5G who was working on building a reference implementation for this CAPIF. They were about to run out of funding like end of 2023. And before that, they came to Etsy. They say, okay, we're working on this. We see a lot of potential. Can you host it for us? We welcome them. And as we kick off this project, we see already on the research side, there are a number of new projects that are taking up it. They want to continue working on that direction. They want to complement it. They want to align it to newer versions of the specification. We also have 3GPP writing some guidelines for implementers, and they're going to be using OpenUK as a reference. And actually, we're seeing as well some external open source projects that might need this CAPIF core function and can use it now that has been published as an open source.
So this is how all the different projects fit together. So they can be interoperable. Right now we have been working, and it's already available, the open source Mano with TerraFlow SDN. OpenSlice is also connected to open source Mano. We are working on OpenSlice on top of TerraFlow SDN, OpenUK to be supported by all of them, as it is a common API framework. But we are part of a larger community. So in this sense, we are collaborating and we are aligning with different open source projects that are part of our ecosystem. So you will see here some of the Linux Foundation Networks projects. You will see here some of the ONF projects, also the Camara, the OpenAir interface. So we are not sitting apart. We need to collaborate, but to have a specific domains for each of the projects is good. Aligning with the community, it's also important, and that's something that we needed to keep calm and do this open source to create this smart network and service community.
Okay, last slide. Some best practices and lessons we have learned along the way. It can be kind of basic, but it took us some work to get through it. First of all is you need to make it useful, okay? You need to make sure you are solving a common problem or a use case. If you're coming from a research consortium or if you're coming from a standardization group where there are already a number of companies involved, it's quite likely going to be useful. So this is already good. And you need to be paying attention to your users, listening to them and hearing to what they have to say. You also need to lower barriers. You need to make it easy for the project to be adopted and for developers to be able to jump in. You need to use well-known, if possible, open source licenses, well-known processes and tools so that developers can access easily. You need to keep openness and transparency in your governance and in the way you organize the work. And you need to provide documentation and learning opportunities. This is not typically the highest priority of developers, but it's important that we pay attention to that we have documentation available that people can follow to try and use what we are releasing. And also we are aiming to do hackfests, tutorials, and training videos, and training opportunities for those developers that want to give it a chance. We also have, all communities have an active Slack channel where the users and the developers can meet and ask questions and help each other. As Ricard was mentioning, you need to seek for synergies. We're not alone in this world. In the telecoms world, there are many actors, many SDOs, many open source projects. So we need to foster this cross-project collaboration and reuse. Let's be sustainable. Let's focus on innovation, and let's use what's available or improve what's available without rewriting it. And also, continuous feedback is important, and upstream first, and this includes standardization. If you see things wrong in the standard, it's important you go back and tell them, try to fix the standard, don't try to diverge from it. And it's important as well as the SDO hear what these open source projects and what these users have to say. And finally, last lessons learned, you need to talk about it, you need to let the world know what you're doing, because you can be doing something super useful and super smart, and if no one knows about it, it will not fly. So this is what we're doing today. Again, this is not one of the priorities of developers, but we're here today to let the world know what we're doing. So thank you, thanks for your time.